If you'll join me for the opening prayer and pledge. Lord, we are meeting today to conduct matters of business. Guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit of fairness, right thought, and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful conclusion. Thank you for being our source of guidance today. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will move to approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Move to citizens' comments.
We have none.
Thank you, sir. We'll go to the approval of the minutes from the January 8th, 2018 regular meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
First and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We will now open a public hearing. Public hearing 2019-01, a resolution to adopt revised subdivision regulations for the city of Fairview, Tennessee. So we'll now open the public hearing. If anyone in the public has any discussions or topics on our discussion tonight for the subdivision regulations, we'll hear you now. If we have no comments, we'll close the public hearing. We'll go back to the meeting. We'll start a new business. Item number 1 is officer election, vacant position of first secretary. Chrissy Salter submitted her resignation. She moved to Ohio. She wanted to tell everybody thanks for her time here, and we also want to tell her thank her for her time. So now we have an open spot of first secretary if we want to fill that position. I'll accept the nomination.
Who does not currently hold a position on the board?
We do.
You want to get promoted?
The one thing about first secretary is you will sign the plats once they're ready to be recorded. So Mr. Anderson might be a good candidate to be able to sign the plats, just being local and able to bounce over.
Make a nomination for Mike Anderson to be first secretary.
Second it.
Second, any additional nominations? All in favor of Mike Anderson as first secretary?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Mike. And we have an open secretary seat. If we want to defer it until we have a full board, when Mr. Calley's present, when we get our 9th member, or if you guys would like to make a motion tonight.
Motion to defer to the next meeting.
We have a first for deferment. Is there a second?
Second.
First and a second for deferment for that secretary position. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, guys. Now move to item 2, a resolution to adopt revised subdivision regulations for the city of Fairview, Tennessee. Staff makes a favorable recommendation of the Planning Commission to adopt the revised subdivision regulations for the city of Fairview, Tennessee.
Motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
Burks for the first, Jenkins with the second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, guys. Next is item 3, recommendation to the Board of Commissioners on ordinance 2019-01, an ordinance to adopt a revised zoning ordinance requested by the Fairview Planning Department. Staff makes a favorable recommendation to the Planning Commission for a favorable recommendation to the Board of Commissioners to adopt the revised zoning ordinance for the city of Fairview, Tennessee.
Make a motion for a favorable recommendation.
Burks first, Anderson second. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
There is one thing on, well, that thing's loud tonight. There is one thing On this, where we had the runoff, and I think Commissioner Burks has also, where we're having the runoff in the streams and stuff, where that's been discussed, and how can that be put in this so it becomes part of this? I mean, we've talked about a little bit on containing the runoff from these job sites. I mean, one thing, we've been in the not only in the newspaper, we've been on the local news from contractors not making sure we don't have runoff into our streams. We're on the top of the mountain. Everything that they do here runs off to the streams down below us. And I mean, I know that's not in it now, but I would like to see that become tied to this in some way, so it has to be addressed later on. Or, I mean, it's not going to be addressed tonight, but is there a way that we can attach that needs to be completed?
Commissioner Burks, do you have any notes? I know you brought us that last month.
What we have, I think, needs more work before it's put into our documents to make sure it fits for us. I guess my question for the city engineer, would that be under the subdivision regulations or would that be under the zoning ordinances?
Majority of that will be found under in the subdivision regulations.
Okay. Then, Mr. Powers, to answer your question, someone would have to make a motion from this board to adopt whatever proposal that is. Then that would be included at some point. And I agree we need something. But I think we can go ahead and pass this as is so that it can go ahead and move up to the BOC, since this is just for the zoning ordinances. That what we need would actually be in the previous item.
Okay.
I
I just don't want it to, a lot of things, you brought that up, it's always, before you brought it up, it was a concern of mine. I lived through it over on Wiley Circle when we had to leave and drive through 4 inches of mud to get out of where we live over there. And I don't think that should be the regular thing. I don't think we should be on television because somebody didn't take the time to put up a proper silk fence and to address these things. And what I don't want is to get all this stuff passed and then it gets forgotten about. That's my only thing. I would like for it to continue to be part of a discussion ongoing.
City Manager Collins, do you have any updates? Is that something you're trying to work and to evolve, to fit us, to try and get?
Yes, sir.
included?
There are three components of it. The first is, Mr. Owen mentioned, this will be in the subdivision regulations. There are a couple of other components to consider. First would be stormwater runoff. I think one of the concerns has been the matter over at Cumberland Estates, and that's a larger issue than what we're talking about. The detention, the silt fencing and other things obviously would be a part of the subdivision regulations. We would also need to amend the city's municipal code for an enforcement arm of that. If it's in the subdivision regulations, that still doesn't give an enforcement matter so that you could go out and do that. Now, once the subdivision regulations were inclusive of that, then we could take that to the Board of Commissioners, have something adopted at the ordinance level, which would give the ability to cite and those sorts of things and bring someone for there. So there are two parts of it we want to move forward. I know we've had numerous discussions about it. It's a little more complicated than, as you well know.
Right.
But there is an effort behind the scenes to kind of make that work the way you desire.
Thank you, sir.
I got one question. The stormwater ordinance, if we put it in there, has the county adopted a complete ordinance? I know it's still, will always be a moving target because as regulations change state and national. But has the county got their ordinance already passed, something for us to use for a guideline?
Mr. Anderson, I do not know that. I can try and get that information for you. I know that some of the other local municipalities have done some of that work, and we're going to try and craft ours out of some of that. But I can find out what the county has and just send that out to the board at large.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, any additional discussion? We have a motion on the floor for a positive recommendation to the Board of Commissioners for the revised zoning ordinance. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, guys. Move to item 4, recommendation to the Board of Commissioners on the rezoning of property requested by Catherine Hudgens, property located at 1091 Highway 96 North, Tax map 21, parcel 52, 6.23 acres. Current zoning district RS40, single-family residential. Proposed zoning district CG, commercial general. The future land use map indicates this parcel as medium residential. If the rezoning is approved, the future land use map will need to be amended as well. We do have Ms. Hudgens present. Ms. Hudgens, if you have any comments for, we'll certainly would hear it.
My husband died December 11th. Heart attack. We'd already talked to a realtor about selling. And we think it would be a good place for business. The grounds, the way it's laid and everything. So I just hope y'all can pass it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
One concern I have is that we have the comprehensive plan that I think I saw today. There is a meeting coming up next month with a rough draft. And I have concern rezoning this commercial property when it doesn't meet the current land use map until we see what that proposed land use will look like after we've gone to this time and trouble to get this comprehensive plan done. So that's a concern I have right now.
Additional questions?
From what I see, that looks to be very close to the split there where you go and get on Highway 100, right? Is that what I see?
I think that's right at the end of Horn Tavern there, right where Horn Tavern meets Highway 96. Sissy, can you zoom in on Horn Tavern just a little bit more right there?
Yeah, because, so it's on Highway 96 North,
Do you see Horn
right at
Tavern?
Horn Tavern Road? Is that where?
Yeah, see where Horn Tavern's coming up and into 96 there?
I see. Okay.
Mr. Collins, in the event we would not accept this currently, if we were to deny it tonight, would the applicant then have to turn around and pay another $200 filing fee in order to get this back before us? So if we were to deny based on today's current future development plan, future land use plan, and then that changes in a month, like, and we get a draft that actually says, well, we do intend for this to be commercial property in the future, I would hate for her to have to come back and pay another $200 fee. Does that make sense? So, good to know.
The proper method to do that, if we want to avoid that, and
Yeah.
also assist Ms. Hudgens through the process to make sure that everyone's treated fairly. And I had some discussion on this, but at this point, I think staff would encourage Ms. Hudgens to withdraw.
Okay.
Given the fact that she already filed, we can carry that forward. If there's an action by the board, then that's going to take us down a different path. If that's where we are and Ms. Hudgens will be favorable to that, my request to her would be to consider withdrawing this matter before you tonight so that it may be brought back up with no penalty or other process moving forward.
How soon are we going to know about this land use map?
The comprehensive plan, as it exists, is set to be delivered to the city of Fairview in April. So we're about 6 weeks, maybe 2 months away. Beyond that, there will be some work to be done because you have to adopt the land use map and change it and do those things. So when the land use plan or the land use map would be adopted could be some time, several months. However, you'll have a document to work from in about 2 months that will give us some direction as to where this area will go or what it may look
Right.
like.
So it's just a suggested land use is what we're anticipating in April, just
That's
that's right.
correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And we have a current land use map that is referencing the medium residential for that area, but it's from 2000.
When we tentatively adopt the new plan use map, we're gonna have a lot of pros and cons from citizens all the way around. People, be a lot of people that's gonna like what they see, and then there's gonna be some that don't like what they see. So that's gonna take a process.
Yes, sir. The adopt,
Body shop is one house between, but they own land.
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
I think the biggest thing tonight is, do you envision this as commercial and change the current land use map? Or would you, like Mr. Burks recommended, try and defer and kind of see where our land use map heads? I've heard at board BOC meetings before, people reference, you know, she could put it for sale, and if somebody wants to buy, they can put it contingent on approval, and they can present what their idea is, and then we know what kind of commercial use they're asking for. So there's a couple different ways.
Right.
I guess my one question on this is, and I know at some time that we've had properties that had residential on both sides that wanted to go to commercial, and we've denied those properties. So while that's not a place that I feel that it's maybe quite the same, we have denied people where there's been residential on both sides. So I'm just wondering, is that setting us up for doing one thing one time and doing it a different this time? Kind of question.
Ms. Hudgens, if you could just speak in the mic for me.
A lot we, industrial park, I did a commercial on the left as you go in there. And it was in the park.
But
if I may complicate matters even further, or attempt not to, given the fact that this is a rezoning, it will have to be heard by the Board of Commissioners as you go forward. So if the board were to take an action tonight, it can still go before the Board of Commissioners with a favorable or unfavorable recommendation from the Planning Commission. So you could vote to approve, you could vote to deny. It could still go before the BOC, which is another step in the process if you chose to go either direction.
And even if we approved it, doesn't necessarily mean that we would have to approve whatever someone wants to come later on and put there, you know, depending on what if someone purchases this property down the road and they bring a plan before us, we don't necessarily have to approve just anything that they want to put there.
In actuality, you would. If it's rezoned for commercial or whatever the purpose is, then nor the BOC nor the Planning Commission will have the opportunity to deny based on what's coming or what we propose, as long as it met the zoning regulation.
Yeah, well,
So-
that's true, as long as it meets the zoning regulations. But,
Correct.
I mean, an Ace Hardware probably wouldn't go there.
Again, that's a matter outside of where we would be. Just so you know, if something were to be brought that met the zoning regulation, then you would have no option but to
Yeah,
move forward with
right.
that item.
Right.
So again, the matter before you be denied will be defer, move to approve, move to deny. An approval and a denial goes before the BOC. Deferment does not.
But you first said that the ideal situation would be if we could request her to withdraw.
If Ms. Hudgens chose to withdraw for now.
How do
then
we explain that? Were they,
Trying as best I can, sir.
I know, I know.
So we just need to send our recommendation, or if Ms. Hudgens feels that it's possibly not going to be approved, she could withdraw, but we could send our recommendation to the board based off our current land use map or however we feel, and they would have an opportunity to discuss it at their meeting and vote on it.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, in addition to the land use issue, my other concern is that we're not going to sandwich a residence between two pieces of commercial property. I understand the Vardens is commercial property, and that's been there. It was there when I moved here in 2004. I understand it's been there a long time. However, we would have a citizen that's now stuck in between two pieces of commercial property.
Yes, ma'am, if you could come to the mic for me so everyone watching can hear you.
apartments are over there, that was, property that was owned, family on each side and behind. It was subdivision behind it.
I think the apartments are going to be considered a multifamily, a residential zoning, where commercial would kind of be more for a business.
I can't understand you.
The apartments would have been a residential use, a multifamily use, instead of a commercial like you're requesting.
Well, it was made commercial. Told me it was.
Well, I would just like to make this point, that if we hold off on changing anything from residential to commercial, say on Fairview Boulevard, because there's a house there, then 25 years from now, it'll look just like it does right now, because there are houses scattered up and down Highway 100. Those houses have been there since the 40s, some of them the 30s, and so it's
But-
going to be commercial. Commercial is what is going to be going in there.
But I think that's what we're trying to capture
Yeah.
with the comprehensive plan, with the land use map, of kind of creating a vision of where commercial will go, where residential will go. And our current map recommends that as medium residential, as for reference.
I think my thing is right now is this, and I know there's a place that in the last year on Highway 100 came with a very similar situation. And because they wanted to have a commercial in a situation, and they was just gonna do an event center or something, but it was gonna be a commercial property, and we denied them because we was kind of doing the island thing. I think that it sort of sets us up for a certain amount of grief if we don't do the same every time and don't treat everybody the same. We denied that out there. The apartments, whether they are somebody renting them or whatever, they are still residential.
I don't think that
Well, it's not
apartments would
single.
be a use allowed on a commercial zoning. So I don't think it's zone commercial. I'm not 100% sure without looking at the map, but I don't think that would be a use that we would allow on commercial.
But the truth is, as far as I'm concerned, I think that Highway 100 and Highway 96 is going to end up being commercial out to the interstate and from 440 to the city limits or the county line. I think that's what's going to happen.
I agree.
But I also know that in the last year, we denied somebody under a very similar type of situation. And by us denying them and then approving you, then we could be setting ourselves up for certain legal ramifications that I don't think that we're ready to deal with. I don't know, as the city attorney's here, and
Yeah, I don't agree with that necessarily, Mr. Power. I mean, look, you got every one of these pieces of property, you know, they're in-rem issues, they're unique. And if you state a rational basis for it, you know, you're not locking yourself into grant every rezoning request that comes along just because of they're surrounded by other commercial properties. So, I mean, we have to look at each one of these on a case-by-case basis.
And Mr. Powers, that piece of property would be, I believe it was closer to the interstate from right here, and that was a request for commercial zoning so they could put in storage units, and there was no commercial properties touching that. This is a little bit different in that the back side of this property does touch some commercial property, but then we are creating an island of residential inside of that.
the piece of property I'm talking about was out here on 100.
Okay.
And it was somebody wanting to put in an event center and some stuff like that.
That was a restaurant.
Restaurant,
Potentially.
yeah,
I
but
know
it
what
was
you're talking
still
about.
going commercial. And that's the one that and we turned them down because we didn't want to make an island. And so that's As far as I'm concerned, I would vote to redo it. I just don't want it to be a thing where we've treated one person one way and another person the different way.
Mr. Butler, in the interest of where we are, my suggestion from what I've heard would be not a motion to defer. My suggestion would be an offer to approve, a motion to approve or a motion to deny, knowing that he's going to go to the BOC with a favorable or unfavorable recommendation based on your vote.
Thank you, sir. Anyone like to make a motion for recommendation?
Before we do, Ms. Hudgens, first and foremost, I can't imagine what you've gone through since your husband passed away in December, and you have my deepest condolences. Seriously, I'm sorry for your loss. I couldn't imagine what I'd go through if I lost my wife. And we've only been married 7 years. So I don't want to just skip over that. I'm sorry for what you've gone through. Right now, do you have a solid understanding of what position in the timeline that this city is in right now, where we're currently trying to plan for Fairview 2040, what it looks like in the next 20 years and our growth going forward, and where we're at with that currently? Yeah, well, right now, we're in a process as a city of trying to decide what we want the city to look like in the next 20 years. Currently, the current plan has this still slotted as a residential use, right? So I can't predict the future, but what I do know right now is that the city's plan for this is to be residential. So if I were to make a vote right now, personally, I would end up making a motion to deny today based upon our current plan going forward. But you have an opportunity right now to withdraw your motion, to currently withdraw your application, is that correct term? And you could wait and see if the future land use actually changes to something where it would be commercial. In which case, if you bring it back before the board, the chances of it actually going through as a commercial rezoning is more likely, because that's our intention if that gets adopted that way. Does that make sense? And in that situation, you wouldn't have to turn around and, I'm sorry? Yeah. In that situation, you wouldn't have to turn around and pay another $200 application fee and go through that whole process. You would just come back before us, correct? Yeah. So just want to make sure that you're fully understanding of the entire situation. So if there is a motion to deny, you understand why. And you do have an opportunity before we make a motion to withdraw if you so choose. Okay.
I want to make a motion to approve the rezoning to commercial.
So we have a recommendation for a positive, we have a motion for a positive recommendation to the board. Do we have a second? So the motion fails for lack of a second. Do we have any other motions?
I'd like to make a motion to deny the request.
So we have a motion on the floor for a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners for a negative recommendation.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any additional discussion? All in favor of the negative recommendation?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
All right, thank you, guys. Micah, you got that vote? Okay. Yeah, Burke's a second. Ms. Hudgens, so it'll now go to the Board of Commissioners with our recommendation, but it'll still be read in front of the board. I'm sure those staff will let you know at the meeting when the meeting will be. It'll now go to the Board of Commissioners, and so I'm sure staff will let you know when that meeting will be, but it will be with our recommendation, so they'll review it and discuss it, and you'll have an opportunity to speak to them as well. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to item 5, final plat, Hudson Family Subdivision, 4 proposed lots on 7.62 acres, property located on Northwest Highway, tax map 21, parcel 61.22, RS 40 zoning district, property owned by Hudson Family Irrevocable Living Trust. All staff comments were met. We have Mr. Bledsoe present, if anyone has any questions, sir. Questions for the applicant? Any discussion? Anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
First and a second, any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Bledsoe.
Thank you.
We have no bonds and letters of credit tonight. We'll go into reports for discussion and information. The city planning staff and city manager.
Yes, sir. One item for you tonight. This is not a matter for the planning commission to vote on, just informational. As you're aware, the city's zoning ordinance is typically adopted by the planning commission, taken to the board of commissioners for final approval, and it becomes municipal ordinance outside of the purview of this body. That said, the planning commission typically approves changes to the city zoning ordinance. There's one matter I have proposed to the Board of Commissioners that will make a change to the zoning ordinance. However, it will have no effect on the function of this board. I do want you to make you aware of that change. As it currently sits, a person is eligible to serve on the planning commission if they are a resident of the city of Fairview. A person is eligible to serve as an elected official of the city if they're a resident of the city of Fairview, effectively for 30 days prior to that election. As a matter of appointment to the city's Board of Zoning Adjustment, the current zoning ordinance requires that someone live in the city for 3 years prior to their appointment to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. The matter was brought up to us a couple of weeks ago. I proposed the change that it would simply state that someone's a resident of the city of Fairview, just like you would be for the planning commission appointment. Again, that matter is not for you tonight. It's for informational purposes only, but to let you know that I've taken that to the BOC. We've had a first reading on it. I expect that it will be adopted at the next BOC meeting. But if you hear there's been a change to the zoning ordinance, which would otherwise come to you, that's the change, and there's no action required on your part for that item. And that's all I have for you tonight.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. City engineer.
Congratulations on new subdivision regulations.
It's exciting. Thank you for all the hard work, yeah.
Point of clarity, some of you may or may not know, several years ago, the state legislature passed what's commonly referred to as the Vested Rights Act. So there will still be some submittals that come through that gain vested rights prior to tonight's adoption of the new subregs. So they will be following under those regulations. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, congratulations.
Thank you,
Happy
sir.
for you.
City attorney. All right. Communication from the planning commission members. Ms. Quall? Mr. Anderson? No. Mr. Powers, sorry, I was going to jump you there. Commissioner Burks?
Nothing tonight.
Mayor Blade? Mr. Jenkins?
Mr. Chairman, I had one minor oversight earlier on last month's meeting minutes. It says that I was absent, and I was actually totally here, as evidenced by the notes where I said a lot of stuff. So is there a way that we can go back and adjust those meeting minutes? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Other than that, I have no.
We briefly talked earlier, I think it's March 4th, 6 p.m. at Camp Marymount is our next comprehensive plan meeting. Is that correct? March 4th, 6 p.m.? You have something to add?
As a matter of course, just to make sure we don't miss anything, if the minutes are going to be changed, my request would be that you offer that in the form of a motion.
Yes, sir.
That the minutes be amended to reflect that Mr. Jenkins was present. If that passes tonight, they will not need to be brought back before you. We
Okay.
just want to make sure that there is a request that that be done.
Thank you, sir. So if you will make that.
Shall I make a motion to add myself as present to the January 8th meeting minutes?
Second.
We have first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and I apologize, just that they'd already been approved, I want to make sure.
No, that's good. So March 4th, 6 p.m., that's all I have is the next comprehensive plan meeting. All try and attend if you can as we try and shape that up. Mr. Calley was out of town this week. I didn't want to recommend that. He's out of town on work. And we talked with Ms. Slaughter earlier. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.